Before I really get into my story, there are some background details that you need to know. My father, first and foremost, is a very intelligent man. He had always been a thinker. He used math and statistics every day in his life. He has to. He's a building manager at a factory at the edge of my small town. But that's beside the point. My point is that I have never known him to be a believer of the supernatural. He always used to tell me, "Son, there's a logical solution to every problem. You may not see one, or it may take you time to come up with one, but there's one there." As you can probably tell by now, I'm not a grown adult. I've just turned 19, and I'm just now learning the true horrors that this world we live in truly has in store for us. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself. I've been tormented by last night's events all day now, and I'm feeling so lost. I'm desperately hoping that by getting this out to you, I'll be able to sleep a little easier. I don't really know why I think that sharing my story with you will make me feel better. It definitely won't get rid of the creature outside my dark bedroom window, but it will tell a story when I'm gone. It will tell the truth of what happened. Anyways, back to the details. My father was in a four-wheeler accident a few years back. He had been pulled into a side ditch one late autumn evening, and the bike had rolled over on top of him. He was knocked unconscious instantly. My tall, strong father was nearly crippled in one evening. It was absolutely devastating, but over the years he has healed to the point where he no longer needs to wear a neck brace every day. My father is still able to walk and do most outdoor yard work activities that he always enjoyed. However, with his now chronic back pain, sitting on the big lawn tractor to mow our 2.5-acre yard for hours on end is, as you can imagine, difficult for him. And that's why I've had 3 strong young children. My father would tell me and my brothers as he finished giving us the to-do list for the day. His strong, yet soft and almost rhythmic voice always lessens my brothers and my own agitation of the day's to-do list growing even so larger by each minute. He needed my brother's help now, more than ever, as I was headed off to the university to pursue my life's goals, while my younger brothers were still in high school. But due to the recent pandemic, my father had moved me back home with him. My younger brothers only came to visit my dad for a week at a time, alternating visits with my mum. I am, however, a full-time resident at my father's, just to be clear, but once again I am straying from the important details. My father had told me that due to the rain in the forecast, I was to cut the grass shorter than normal and twice this week. Being out in the country had its benefits, as our neighbours couldn't hear the loud roar of our riding lawnmowers' engines, no matter how late we cut the grass. Again, being in the country, there were large predatory animals that came out at night, from coyotes and foxes to even sometimes bears. Due to this, my father did not allow anyone to go out late. My father walked with me along the property as he gave me pointers for when I was to cut the grass later that day. "This here, watch yourself," my dad told me, as he gently grabbed a hold of an outstretched tree branch. "This stuff is real sharp. Used to cut up my arms as I drove by. If I could get my chainsaw out, reckon I'd be able to cut up these sharp branches and get them out of the road." He continued, as we kept walking down to the edge of our property. "The problem with that is it's too damn heavy. Ain't gonna do my back any good carrying a saw all the way down here. It's too much work for what it's worth." He trailed off. The back of our property ends in a small river. In the more recent years, the river would flood into our backyard in the summer and make it marsh-like. Because of the immense water flood, my father would always be the one to cut the grass on the tractor down by the water. And he would only go where the ground was higher than the lower flooded ground. He'd always say that it was because the wet and soft ground was potentially damaging for the lawnmower, or that there was a possibility of getting stuck and he didn't want to push the lawnmower out of the marshy ground on his own. However, there was no flooding this year, and the lower grounded grass patches were quite large and overdue for a trim. I told my dad that I would cut the whole area of the grass, and even get the tall and overgrown grass patches when I did cut it. After all, it was only really about 5 or 6 inches longer than the rest of the grass. No! My dad instantly cut me off. I studied his nervous expression. No, we... He started, but took a long pause. I've decided that we won't cut that patch of grass. I'm going to use the push mower for that, he finished, as though he wasn't entirely certain if he would or wouldn't. You can't, not with your back, I was quick to respond. Nobody wants any setbacks for you, and what if you hurt yourself all the way down there, and nobody knows? I jumped to the worst case conclusion. I've been told before that it's something I'm really good at doing. Plus, the lawn tractor is faster and so much easier. I looked at him with concern, but he didn't return my gaze. He just kept staring into the overgrown patch of grass in question. Then he finally spoke. Just don't worry about that, okay? Just go around that. I don't want you going in there. We don't know what's in there. He trailed off again, still staring. I assumed that he was talking about my allergies. I am allergic to most outdoor weeds and pollens, so, to my mind, it made sense as to why he would say those words in such a way. He was genuinely concerned. Come on now, let's go back up to the house. I've got some things I want to get done before work. Not wanting to cut the grass in the heat of the day, I procrastinated my chore until after dinner one evening. I went outside and pulled open the large white garage door, sitting down on the orange lawnmower. I popped my AirPods in and put on my noise-cancelling headphones. I began my music at full blast, turned the key to the ignition and felt the vibrations of the lawn tractor kicking to life. Even on the loudest volume setting, I could still hear the faint thudding of the engine in the background of the phrase, "How to save a life." I put the machine in gear and rode it down our driveway and behind our large red brick house. The cool 6 p.m. breeze ever so slightly blowing my long shaggy hair away from my face. That day was painfully hot earlier, and suddenly now I nearly needed a sweater and track pants. Great, I thought. I'm going to freeze to death before I get this done. The blades of the tractor roared louder than the engine as I turned them on and began cutting. About an hour into my grass-cutting playlist, my phone vibrated violently in my pocket. Someone was texting me. My phone read, "Big Sir." That's Dad, I thought to myself. I parked the tractor, put a pause on my music and flipped the blade switch to the off setting. "It's getting late, son. How's it going?" My father had texted me from work. "I think I can finish in just about an hour," I replied. I waited for him to respond. Seconds later his message came through. "Be careful round the outside with the trees. Don't want you to get scratched up." I smiled at his concern and wished him luck with the rest of his shift at work. He'll be happy that he won't have to cut the far end, I thought to myself. I had full intentions of disobeying my father and cutting the overgrown patch anyway. I'd rather get a runny nose and be sneezing all night than him cut it and hurt his back again. I should have listened to him. I rode around the backyard, jamming out to my music and enjoying the slightly chilly night sky. The moonlight illuminated my pathway in between the tall oak trees. I was really enjoying the quiet evening alone to myself. It was peaceful. After about another 15 minutes of cutting, I came to the uncut patch of grass that my dad told me not to cut. It was a large circular shape near the far corner of my property, close to a large cluster of trees. The overall patch was a deep green colour, thriving from being so close to the river, only a few feet away from the trees behind the grass. I slowly advanced the lawn tractor towards the grass patch. Suddenly, my music glitched and began blasting loud static in my ears. Just as suddenly as it started, it stopped completely. I shifted the tractor into park and whipped out my phone. As I was reloading my playlist, I paused. I felt very uneasy, as if someone or something was watching me. I looked around the yard and in between the trees, the strong and bright moonlight providing me with an excellent view around me, but that didn't settle me down. I took off my earmuffs and pulled out my earbuds. It was absolutely dead silent around me. There was absolutely no animals hopping around, no tree branches cracking, no crickets or cicadas chirping. The only thing that I could hear was a rhythmic thumping of what I quickly realized was my heart beating. I decided to quickly finish cutting the grass and head back to the house, trying my best to brush off my anxiety. I continued my playlist and started up the tractor. The engine roared back to life, and I circled back around, quickly cutting the grass patch and rode the riding lawnmower back up towards the house. Unease ever so apparent. I hurried up the driveway and backed the lawnmower into the garage. I quickly closed the large white garage door by hand and rushed towards the front door of the house. Again, my music became very loud and suddenly cut out. I pulled out my earbuds and stuffed them into my pockets while scrambling towards the door. I stopped dead in my tracks and froze. My whole being screamed at me to just lunge towards the door and sprint inside, but I didn't. I felt something staring right at me. Goosebumps formed on my arms. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Through the trees to the left of my house, about 10 feet of the front door, and where I stood was a large shadow. This massive thing had to be about 7 foot tall. It had this muscular outline to it. Its fur reflected a white shimmer of the moonlight through the trees. Its head was long and oval-shaped, but that's all that I could make out. I knew that though I couldn't see its eyes, it was staring right back at me, into my eyes, into my soul. In that moment, I knew exactly what it knew, that I was its prey. The shadowy creature was so still that, had it not been for the moonlight reflecting off its fur, I wouldn't be able to tell if it was alive or not. It could have passed off as a shadowy patch of boulders on a cloudy night, perhaps an oddly piled stack of wood that my dad and brothers had been working on the day before. But this creature was not anything of that sort. It was alive. It was hunting. But this wasn't a hungry animal. This wasn't a predator looking to bring back food to its young. This was all for sport. No. This was personal. The hate that radiated from that creature was pure. Immense even. It was watching me. It wanted to know how to get inside. I knew that the creature was watching me to find out how to get inside. It wanted inside with me. I honestly doubt that the creature would fit in the front hallway. It was too large. What felt like hours had passed before suddenly my music kicked back on in full volume. Because I had disconnected my headphones while jamming them into my pockets moments earlier, the speakers on my phone blasted at full volume. The creature heaved in its chest and let out an ear-shattering cry. It leaned forwards as its mouth opened at a near full 180-degree angle, and the sound was so very horrible. It began as a low growl, almost like a thundering sky, and then a high-pitched woman's wailing could sort of be heard joining into the sound. The thunderous growl cut out at some point, and the screech wailing continued. It almost sounded like scratching a fork on a ceramic plate, or dragging fingernails across a chalkboard, before suddenly cutting out completely. It propelled itself forward with its bulky arms, shoving the ground, and flew towards me. I threw my phone across the driveway and away from the front of the house, hoping that the creature would go after the sounds, and rushed inside the front door, locking it behind me. I instantly regretted throwing my phone away, because we no longer had any landline phones. I was in terrible danger and had no way of calling for help. The creature didn't even follow the sound. Seconds after I had locked the door, it had slammed into the front door and began pounding its arms and head against it. As if it would help my situation, I pressed my body against the front door. Every time the creature slammed its weight into the door, I felt the vibrations. I was surprised that the door was still holding, but hey, I definitely didn't have any complaints. I rushed away from the door and decided hiding was my best bet. I scrambled through the hallway and past a small kitchen, grabbed a fistful of steak knives, and continued past the kitchen and down the bedroom hallway towards my room. Seeking security in my bedroom, I shoved my dresser in front of my door and closed the curtains, then leaped into my closet and curled up into a ball. My adrenaline was wearing off, and I began to cry. I clutched the knives hard in my hand and regretted throwing my phone away. I debated quite a few times hopping out of my window and trying to sneak outside and around the house to grab my phone, but seeing the speed and power of the creature firsthand, I decided against it. The menacing pounding on the front door was a constant reminder of my near-death experience, and it was a constant reminder of the nightmarish monster haunting me. At random intervals, in between the banging on the door, the creature would howl its banshee shrieking cry. Every time it would screech, I would get flashes of its image in my mind. The dark and shiny fur, its large bulky figure, its inhumanly long arms with cleavers for claws, and the oval-shaped head with its unhinged mouth. I'd never be able to forget those images. All at once the pounding stopped. It was as if the creature had disappeared. Silence was in this moment now the scariest sound to me. I couldn't tell if the monster had just stopped or given up entirely. I had wondered if this was a trap for me. Was this being smart enough to set a trap? To bait me out using my own curiosity? I didn't dare move from my sanctuary, my heart rapidly banging against my chest. Every breath I took was an unsteady and long inhale, followed by a short and nearly wheeze-like exhale. Being alone and trapped for what seemed to be hours gave me plenty of time to reflect. Firstly, this creature either somehow had been living in the small patch of grass that my father wanted me to avoid, or it had some sort of connection to it. Perhaps it had a nest buried in the grass. In any case, this creature was enraged. No, it was filled with pure hatred because of my actions. The other thing that I had come to realize is that while this creature is near, it affects electronic devices negatively. Some sort of energy that it emits from its mere presence can disable electronics. I'm not sure how it works entirely, however, I do speculate that this creature caused the disruption to my phone and AirPods earlier that evening. I have no way of proving this, but I do believe this entity is capable of distorting time, or perhaps slowing time while it's on Earth. As hours seemed to pass by without any sign of the sun rising while I was hiding. At some point, without me realizing, the creature had stopped trying to break down the front door. After about an hour of consistent silence, I had begun to believe that the being had related back to whatever hell it crawled out of, holding the biggest and sharpest of the steak knives I had collected. I cautiously made my way out of my closet and towards my bedroom window overlooking the backyard. I carefully positioned myself behind the curtains and peered out of my window. The moonlight shone over the clearing in the woods that was my backyard. At first, I looked around the perimeter of the backyard, scanning the trees quickly as the branches slowly swayed in the wind. Then a large figure's movement caught my attention from my peripheral vision. It was there. The creature was standing in the middle of the backyard. How could I have missed it? The being was suddenly more apparent than before. It had its head lowered and close to the ground, almost as if it were a large dog sniffing out any squirrels or rabbits that may be nearby. It was looking for my scent, for me. The creature's long black fur shone in the moonlight as it continued its search for me. The being was very large, and its upper body broad and muscular, like that of a weightlifting bodybuilder. Its arms were long and similarly muscular, with its long and skinny cleaver-like claws protruding from its hairy paws. This creature did not appear to have any hind legs. Instead, its body ended in a very long tail. The tail of this creature started from where I would guess its waist would have been, and made up about 2/3 of the creature's entire length. From the base of the creature's neck were small spikes, presumably bone, protruding from its back and led along its spine and to the end of its tail. The head of this demonic entity was easily the most nightmare-inducing imagery that I have ever had the unfortunate luck of bearing witness to. It was an oversized skull of a canid creature. No hair or even flesh covered the skull. Its bottom jaw was exposed as well. Its teeth were barely discernible from the skull itself, and 2 large fangs stuck out from its top jaw. The monster had dark, empty, hollow pits where its eyes should have been. Its nose was an empty cavern of darkness, and its mouth seemed to be agape at all times. I gasped, but ever so slightly. At first, I didn't even realize that my terror and shock was audible. However, the predator definitely heard its prey. The creature had, in an instant, whirled its head around at an unnatural angle and stared deep into my eyes. I knew this thing could see me. I knew it was watching me. There was no point in running or hiding anymore. All I could do was watch as this being brought one arm in front of the other and crawled its way towards my bedroom window, its tail excitedly wagging behind it. No, that's not right. Its tail wasn't wagging. It was more like a snake's tail. The entity's tail appeared to be assisting it traverse. The thing picked up speed as its jaws unhinged and let out another, ear-piercing cry. I winced in pain and covered my ears, dropping my knives. I cursed myself for my mistake and bolted from my bed across my room. Not the smartest idea, I know, but in the moment, my flight reaction took over. I scrambled under my bed and lay quiet. The loud slam into the side of my house indicated that the being was here. I fully expected the monster to smash through my window and tear me apart. However, that never happened. I cringed as I imagined my death by hands of that creature in hundreds of different ways, fast and slow, painful and quick, but still, after what felt to be hours, nothing else happened. Perhaps the creature killed itself when it rammed into the wall of the house. No, that thing probably can't even die. Well, maybe the being is nocturnal and is returning back to its home. No, it's still very dark outside. Did the creature give up trying to kill me? That's ridiculous. That monster had a deep personal vengeance that it wanted to get by killing me. And then I heard it. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of the sound. It was fast, gentle, and quiet. The sound repeated. It was a tapping sound. The creature was tapping ever so gently against my window. Was this an attempt for it to try to get me to come out of hiding? The tapping became almost rhythmic. It was letting me know that it knew I was in there. I reached a shaking hand out from under my bed and pulled my iPad towards me from the bottom shelf of my nightstand. You may be wondering why I haven't used my iPad to call or text my father or get a hold of the police, right? Well, believe me, if my iPad still worked well enough for me to do so, I definitely would have. Instead, I've decided to type this out and hopefully leave a log of the events as a warning. Even now, as I type this out, the tapping is becoming more furious. Did the glass just crack a little? Wait, there's another one.